There we go. All right, well, let's begin tonight's class. So, good morning, good evening rather, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's essay writing practical class. My name is William. I'm going to be your teacher for this evening. And just a little bit of quick background. Okay, today's class is a bit of an experimental class. We're looking at some different ways of teaching the new version of the PTE exam essay writing question. As you guys know, recently there's been a big change in the PTE essay writing, and the new essay writing task is a lot more complex, a lot more demanding compared to what it used to be. Right. And many students are having a bit of trouble with this one. So today we're doing a practical class to kind of show you guys a bit more of a different approach to how you can go about doing this question. Okay. The reason I say this is a bit of an experimental class is this is the first time that I'm going to be teaching this way. The method that I will be using tonight is going to be a slightly advanced version of essay writing. It's specifically going to be targeted at producing high score essays. Okay, so the kinds of essays that we'll be producing tonight are going to be band 8 to band 9 type essays. However, that being said, right, even if your current target score isn't that high, I think it still doesn't matter, right? Because the things that we're teaching you are just good logical principles that you should be using anyway. So even if you're only going for a lower score, like a band 5 or 6, it doesn't matter, right? The ideas that we get today, you can still try to apply to your lower level essays, and it will still overall be an improvement for your content and logic. Okay. Now, I will say tonight is a practical class, so I will not be checking anybody's essays or anything like that. I will be mostly getting you guys to do some exercises during class. Now, I see a lot of new faces. Tonight, we've got a bit of a mix. Some people in the class are my old students. Some people are brand new, joining us for the first time. Okay, for all the new guys, just want to say big welcome to you. Don't be shy during tonight's class. Please feel free to share as many ideas as you want. Feel free to make mistakes, totally okay, right? We're all here to learn. It doesn't really matter, if your ideas are right or wrong. All right, so let's get into it. What are we going to be learning today? Today we're going to look at a small part of the essay writing, one particular style of essay. So in the PT essay writing, there are many different ways that you can write an essay. But what I find is that everybody has their own kind of little preferences, right? Some people like to write one-sided essays, argumentative essays, 就是强调一方面的作文. Right. Some people like to write comparative essays where they talk kind of half and half positive, half negative, or something like that. Some people like to write problem solutions and so on. Tonight, we're going to look at just one type, which is a comparison style essay, right? So I'm going to be teaching you how to structure and how to logically order a comparison. Right, one of the most popular types of essay structures that students like to write. In the future, I will probably do some more of these kinds of classes, teaching other styles of essay in case this isn't exactly the one you want. And this kind of structure can be used for most questions. All right, I would guess that it's suitable for probably like 70 to 80% of all essay questions in the pool. So if you can get good at this one type, you've got most of the essays in the exam covered. Right? Okay, so let's start off with some very simple basics. We'll do a little bit of theory, but I'm hoping that tonight will be mostly practical, which is you guys coming up with some writing ideas and sharing them in class, right? But just so everybody has a basic understanding of what a comparison is. So what is a comparison? Very simple, okay? So a comparison is when you judge two or more things, right? By comparing like their similarities or differences. Yeah. So it doesn't matter what those two things are. Like you can, for example, be comparing studying overseas versus studying locally, right? You can be comparing like building roads versus building public transport. It doesn't really matter what the two things are as long as they share some kind of similar feature, which you can use to kind of judge them, which is better, which is worse, and so on. Okay, so that's the whole idea of a comparison. So let's start off with a very, very simple example. So imagine if I had a question like, which is better, apples or oranges, right? Now, a lot of people will be thinking, right, well, I can think of some of the pros of apples and some of the cons, and maybe same thing, pros of oranges, cons of oranges, and try to compare them. So what if I did something like this? Can I compare these two ideas that I have here? Apples are sweet and delicious, and oranges are high in vitamin C. These are both positive kinds of things. Is this a comparison? Not really, right? So although these are both benefits, they're not the same kind of information, right? They're both good, but I don't really know which one is better or anything like that. There's no way to kind of compare these. So the key thing you need here is some kind of comparison or judging method, right? What exactly are you measuring them on when you're saying which one is better? So, right, this is where we need a couple of different things to have a successful comparison. These are the things you want to think about, right? Number one, right? You need at least two different things to compare to each other, right? So in this case, apples and oranges, no problems, right? Second thing is you need a judging or measuring method. So how exactly do you decide which one is better? Are you basing the judgment on which one tastes better? Are you deciding on which one is cheaper? Are you deciding which one is more flexible, can be used in different recipes, right? Are you talking about nutrition? Which one is healthier for you, right? These are maybe all different ways that you can judge which fruit is better out of the two, right? And you need to choose at least one of these to have a good comparison, right? Then after that, you just describe each one. Once you've chosen your, different way of actually doing the comparison. Next, you just measure them to see which one actually turns out better. And finally, in the conclusion, you give a result. So does that make sense to everyone? Yes. Oh, sorry. I just noticed some people in the class have said that is there any audio problems? Is anyone having trouble hearing me? If not, I'm assuming it might be you haven't joined the Zoom audio. Yeah. All right, cool. All right, so it looks like the audio should be working, hopefully. All right, so with this idea in mind, right, so we need some kind of way to judge them, some way to measure what is better, right? So here's an example, right? Let's introduce a judging method. So a very simple one might be judging method is whatever's cheapest is better. Okay, so then I can describe the features. Which one is cheaper? Apples $3 a kilo, oranges $2 a kilo. Using that method, the result is oranges are better than apples. All right. Now, what I want to be clear about is that this is just one method of doing this judgment, right? What we're seeing here, the judging method is actually your opinion, right? So is cheaper actually better? That's up to you, right? You can decide if that is the way that you want to judge or not. If I have a different judging method, so for example, if I'm judging based on something like nutrition, maybe my result is different. Maybe apples are better than oranges in that kind of case. So it's up to you to decide what your comparison method is. But as long as you have this, now we have what we consider a very good logical structure. Okay, so this is the base logic structure of pretty much any comparison. Now, I know you guys are all thinking, well, this is too simple, right? This is, the PTE exam doesn't have super simple questions like this. But if we switch over to a PT question, right, then we're going to see a very similar kind of pattern. 对啊，说到这一点，yes，iPhone brings up a good point，就是我能不能说国语？我是这样子的，我平常讲课的时候呢，我是用英文讲的。为什么？因为我是一个澳洲的本地人，我的英文讲的水平呢，通常比中文稍微好一点。我中文当然就是听得懂也看得懂的，所以如果你们今天晚上有什么问题想问，那个就是你们用英文讲感觉比较困难的话，当然我欢迎你们用中文讲。好吗？但是我大部分的课是用英文讲的，而且你也可以趁机会就是稍微补充一下你们的听力的基本功。对对，Yeah. So I'll be speaking mostly in English, but please, if there's anything you don't understand, feel free to ask some questions in Chinese. I'm totally okay with that. Yeah. Okay, good. So let's have a look at a real PT style question, shall we? Right. So here's an example. Professional athletes can earn very high salaries, and many people argue that this is unfair and that other professions deserve higher salaries. So, to what extent do you agree or disagree? So, we're talking about, famous sports athletes, right? Like basketball players, football players, things like that. They're earning millions and millions of dollars, right? What's your opinion? So, my opinion is my judging method, right? So, how do I decide how much someone gets paid? Well, here's an example. My opinion is people deserve to be paid whatever they're worth, right? However valuable their work is, that's how much they deserve to be paid. So now I can basically judge these two, right? I can just say how valuable is a professional athlete's work and how valuable are other professions in comparison, right? To see whether or not they deserve that money. So my description is this, right? I think professional athletes are super high value, right? Because they're very famous. They have a big reputation and brand name, so they make a lot of money. Yeah. If your company has a professional athlete representing you, you're going to sell a lot more products, right? Through merchandising, through advertising and stuff. So, do we think it's worth the money? Absolutely, right? Their value is super high. So, yeah, they deserve to be paid that much. What about other professions on the other side? That's my other side, right? Are they undervalued? Are they worth that much? Well, I can say that there's definitely some jobs which I think are worth more than they're paid, right? So my examples are things like teachers and nurses. Everyone believes that they do very valuable work, but they don't get paid very much, right? So yeah, there's definitely some things which we think are maybe undervalued a little bit. So what's the result of my analysis here? The result might be that public servants deserve to be paid more, but that doesn't mean that athletes should be paid any less. I think people are getting paid mostly a fair amount, right? And once again, this is just one example of a comparison, right? This is the result that I get using this judging method. If I change the judging method, then if I'm talking about, for example, equal pay and things like that, then maybe the result can be very different. Okay. If my opinion is that everybody in our society should have an equal level of, monetary or financial security and comfort, in that case, maybe professional athletes shouldn't be paid that much because one guy getting 20,000 a year compared to a guy getting 100 million a year, not very fair, right? So just remember, your judging method decides, right, what the final result should be in a comparison. All right. So up to this point, any questions? 大家有什么问题吗？大家都大概理解这个概念吗？Yes，安东王。
Sorry again，我有一个问题，就是如果我写 agree or disagree 的这一类的，就是文章的话，然后就比如说这个题，然后我先给出的观点就是那个就是职业运动员他们可以挣更高的工资，因为他们是值这么多钱的。然后我 body one，然后我就是说，职业运动员有很高的价值，他们比赛比如说给国家带来了很多的那个知名度。然后
对
第二个观点我说那个就是职业运动员，然后他们他们可以教其他的那个运动员，然后他们就类似于他们的贡献很大。 然后
嗯，
body one 我提出我的观点，然后举一个例子 for example，然后 body two 我也是一个观点，然后 for example，然后是结论。一个 body 我就是只有一个观点的话，会不会有点少？还要不用
没有
firstly 或者 secondly？
啊，这个通常没关系的，因为呢，你
OK
是每个观点就是要扩展的，对不对啊？
OK，
像比如说我这里只是一个 topic sentence，我只是大概描述
呀呀呀
方向。我如果要扩展的话，我会说他们到底带来了多少钱？他们现在就是比如说一个大的那个叫什么牌子，他们到底是增加了他们的那个叫什么 profit 增加了多少？然后可能就是他们是值得多少15%、20%，比如说等等。我如果
yeah，
扩展的话，
这个
很多。
like a famous brand is yeah
但是呢，你刚
yeah
才描述的就不是你刚才描述的呢，虽然是可以的，但是不是一个对比了，因为你刚
OK
才就在说的是两个优点，你不是在对比两样东西，对吧？所以这
OK
也是一种作文的框架，对吗？但是呢，
嗯
这个就不是我们今天晚上在讲的这种例子。
OK
Yeah，而且这也不是
这个
错的，对吧？我们不是说你每一个作文一定要写一个对比，我们今天晚上只是介绍一个对比方式，好吗？然后你们在家里可以试试看，就是这种方式是不是比较适合你。如果发现就是不是特别喜欢这种作文格式的话，也可以换另外的。我们以后也会开另外的课，就是教不同类型的作文的。好
OK thank you Vicky。
，Yeah, yeah, no problems. Yeah, I'll take one more question. Yanan, did you have a question?
嗯，我的问题是，我们之所以这个文章可以写 comparison，是不是因为它的问法是 to what extent do you agree or disagree？如果没有这个 extent，是不是我们只能写一边？
是这样子的，有些题目呢是可能稍微适合一点对比，他们有些题目他们问的时候就听上去像一个对比，
哦，OK，
但是呢，你会发现大概像我说的，大概70%-80%的作文呢，就假如说他们没有提出两方面的话，你也大多数情况可以编出来一个两方面的。
OK，所以就大多数情况 comparison 可以运用到。
对的，是的，
嗯
当然呢，就是你有些他们可能是问的稍微怎么说窄一点，对不对啊？像比如说我知道现在在题库里面有个题目在问的就是那个，比如说那个 What are the current environmental problems and how do I solve them？这个它就是比较固定，你要说的是什么东西，可能一个对比
嗯
不是特别适合，
嗯
对不对啊？
嗯
但是呢，如果他们就是没有问的那么细的话，那大多数情况你是可以找到两方面可以对比一下。
，OK，好，
对。
谢谢老师。
No problems. Yeah, these are some good questions. All right, let's look at one more example. And I think this is a good example of what Yan just said, right? This question is not designed like a comparison. 这个题目本身呢，问的方法不是特殊，就是一定要你说一个对比，对吗？Artificial intelligence is good in the teaching field. To what extent do you agree with this? Okay, so this is just an agree or disagree kind of thing. It's not specifically say do a comparison, right? But I can still do a comparison if I want to, right? So for example, I can say let's compare teachers versus artificial intelligence to see whether or not they're actually good, right? So, and here's my judging method. I think that for education, teaching materials need to improve creative and critical thinking skills, right? So that's my judging method. I'm basically saying, is artificial intelligence good at this or not, right? And then I try to judge it. So my description for teachers is that teachers will design classes and materials which will inspire students, which will stimulate their thinking. So teachers generally do a good job, right? But what about artificial intelligence? Well, I might say something like artificial intelligence these days is used for a lot of plagiarism. People are just copying stuff without really reading it or thinking about it too much. Now, I'm a teacher, I'm maybe a bit biased over here, but that could be an example of something I write. That's my analysis, right? And so the final result is that artificial intelligence is bad for learning, right? And should be banned or something like that. So you guys can see the important thing here is doesn't matter if you agree or not, right? I can easily argue the opposite. The important thing here is that you can see a very clear and easy to understand logical chain. 好吗？这个就是符合了我们就是最基本的这个作文的逻辑要求，好吧？就是那个逻辑的评分标准。Yeah, and I think that's the part which students are probably struggling with or having the most problems with recently. Yeah. All right, so these are just some quick examples that I'm pulling out. And tonight, the first exercise that I want to do with you guys is to practice some of these kinds of brainstorming. So I've prepared a couple of questions, and I'm going to let you guys have a look at them, and then just in the meeting chat, maybe suggest some different ideas, some different judging methods or things that we can maybe compare. Okay, so let's have a look, right? The structure will look like this. Our introduction will contain our opinion, which is our judging method. Body 1 and body 2 will be a detailed description of each item. And the conclusion, right? I should probably write conclusion here, right? Should be the summary of the results. So that's normally how the flow of your essay will go. So here is our first question. Should marketing in companies which produce consumer goods like food and clothing place emphasis on the reputation of the company or on short-term strategies like discounts and special offers? All right, so everyone take a moment to quickly read this question. Right now, this first question is designed like a comparison question. So when you look at it, the first thing you're thinking about is probably a comparison. Right? So it should be pretty obvious. We're comparing reputation versus, short-term strategies like discounts and special offers. Which one's better? So what I want to ask you guys is, when you look at this, how would you judge this? What do you think is our main goal here? What, in your opinion, how do I know which strategy is the best? What's the main goal of these strategies? So have a think about it, and if you have an idea, please feel
the
free.
sales figure,
Sorry?
the sales figure, or
Yeah. So I'm saying, so we're doing a comparison. So I just want to know, how do you decide what strategy is better?
Company reputation is much better, I think.
No. So you're saying, what you're telling me is the result, your answer, right? What I
Yeah.
want to know is, how did you choose company reputation? What is it based on? Yeah. So Alyssa's got a good one. Alyssa and KK have very similar things. They're saying which one can make more money, right? Or which one generates more profit. So you might think the main point of marketing strategies is to make a lot of money, right? So whichever one makes more money is the better one. That seems like a very reasonable example, right? Yeah, good, right? Liana says maybe what we care about is like the long-term goal or the long-term growth, right? Maybe that's the main purpose. So you can choose whichever one you want, right? Now, I think profit seems to be the most popular answer. So let's just go with that one, shall we? Right? Yeah. So the judging method that I think is the most popular so far out of everyone's answers is, it should be based on our profits, right? Whichever one makes the most money is the best. Let me just quickly grab some gray text here. All right. So judging method is, marketing strategies are all about profits, right? More money equals better. So that's our main opinion or theory. Now, again, you may agree with this, maybe you disagree. It doesn't really matter, right? This is just an academic essay. Don't get too emotionally attached to it. As long as it's logical and makes sense, that's fine. Okay, good. So let's go with our descriptions then. Let's start with, first one should be the reputation, right? So we'll say there's the reputation side, and there's also the short-term strategies side. So that's our A and B, right? And can anyone give me like just a very quick description for each one? How much money do they make? Who can tell me? So our judging method is how much money, right? So how do we measure this? Or how do we explain this? You don't have to give an exact number, you just have to give a description. Any ideas? So you're just
Like
yes.
I think reputation can make more money to buy products in a company which has a good reputation because people contract the company is not achieved overnight. So the
Yeah,
company which has a good reputation can earn more money.
yeah. So good,
Yeah.
right? So this idea that people trust you, right? So, people trust you, you have brand recognition or something like that, right? And you probably have like things like, for example, customer loyalty, long term, right? So you have lots of people who always buy like the same brands over and over again. That's your way of making money. Good. What about the short-term strategies? What's the point of the short-term strategies? How do these make money? Yeah, good. Jingyue has a good idea, right? Maybe short-term strategies are more about like cash flow, right? You know, cash flow, right? Get rid of a lot of stock quickly, right? To make fast profits or something like that. Yeah, exactly. It's all about speed and stuff like that. So you can see one of them is very long term, one of them's now, obviously, if I wanted to put more detail, if I was writing a full essay, I might do a bit of a financial analysis to see which one is more profitable over the long term, right? And maybe after, and I'm just making this up, I don't know for sure, right? But maybe the final, final result is that, as Andong Wang says, maybe final result is that reputation is more profitable long term, like 5 or more years or something like that. And so maybe that one's slightly better, right? So now keep in mind, we're just making this up, but you can see that even if the exact statistics or stuff is not exactly right, you can see that the logic is very simple and easy to follow, right? So does that make sense to everyone?
就是我听的有点不太懂，能不能再讲一下它这个逻辑？
对，所以这个用中文讲这个逻辑呢，就是我们现在就是在一个对比作文里面呢，你的主要的观点不是我到底选哪个，你的主要的观点是怎么样评论哪个更好，好吗？你是需要一个评论方式。所以呢，我们在这个题目里，他在讲的是那个叫什么不同的 marketing strategy，对不对？卖东西的方式，怎么样评论呢？我们就选了一个很简单的，就是哪个赚更多钱，哪个就最好。你大概理解我的意思吗？
那我能不能一边倒，就是我只写一个，就是那个 short term strategies？
可以的，但是呢，记住，今天晚上我们是专门在学的是一个对比的框架，好吗？你这个也可以的，但是你的就是一个另外一种框架了，就是只是强迫
哦，
那种。
好的。
也可以是可以的，但在作文里是你有很多选择怎么样写，对吗？但是呢，就是我们为什么教这种框架呢？主要的原因就是我觉得很多学生就是刚开始的时候不是很会排逻辑，所以你们就是要学一些这种不同的排逻辑的格式，习惯一下。你们习惯了以后，这种逻辑呢，你会发现不是特别困难。对，Yes，KK。
老师，我就想问一下，就是现在我可不可以这么总结，就是在那个 judging method 那里，就是我们先找一个他们两个的一个就是共同点，就是他们都可以去得到的东西。然后 description of A 那里，我们可以就是说，举个例子，就是 reputation 这里，然后我就说 reputation 它可以怎么样，它能有什么好处？但同时，我可不可以在 description of B 那里就说 short term 有什么坏处？这样子，
呃，
就也是一个
但是这
comparison。
个这个不是一个对比，除非你这两个都是同样一种信息。
OK，因为我现在就是有点没太懂，就是在那个 A 那里 reputation 它也可以 make profits，但 short term 那里它也可以 make profits，但是这样的话，我们那个 conclusion 那里怎么去
对，
对比出？
我们就是在算到底有多少钱，对
哦，
吗？所以你
就
要记住，这个只是一句话，这只是一个 topic sentence，对不对？
哦
你在
，OK，明白。
你在扩展这个段落的话，你可能里面有很多数据，就
嗯
是比如说某一个，我举个例子，某一个公司，对不对啊？他们像一个大的超市，他们每个星期都是有打折或者什么，然后他们就是通常每次打折会赚多少钱，对。
，OK，
对不对啊？或者对比一下，跟个大的公司，像苹果有个很大的名声的话，他们的可能5年、10年的这个增加的，就是增加客户的速度到底有多快，对不对啊？所以就是扩展的时候呢，你会拉出很多数据，但是我们这里就是一个大概的方向，可能知道，我
哦
到最后
，OK，
算出来哪个赚更多钱，哪个就是更好的。
OK，清楚，行。
我这个最后我现在是没算过，我是随便编一下的，说不定也是另外一方面。对
OK，然后所以就是通过这个 A 的一个 profits 的量，然后再去对比 B 的 profits 的量，我们最后得出来就说，举个例子，就 reputation 更好，赚更多的钱。
有可能的。对
OK，就 OK，
我不知道，就是我现在还没有把
嗯
的东西放进去，说不定这个不对的。
，OK，我清楚，
比如说我们可能最终的结果呢是 reputation，那就是is 那个叫什么 more important for luxury brands，对不对？
就看我们怎么说了，这个就是。
对，whereas short term strategies 那个叫什么are more profitable for daily groceries。这样你说不定出来的效果是一半一半也可能的。
哦
好吧，对，这个就是我现在，因为我们还没有真的仔细分析过，我们只是有个大概的框架。对
，OK，好的，
，Yeah, yeah, good.
好的，谢谢。
No problems. Yeah, but I think this is already very good, right? Because as soon as you look at this, everyone can mostly understand the logic and everyone knows roughly what the essay is going to contain. You got a very strong direction here. Okay, let's do one more. Try this one. The environment in which you are raised is important. Is it better for children to grow up in the countryside or in a big city? Yeah, by the way, these are all current questions. So all of these questions are just copied directly from the Jijing question pool. Okay, so we're just taking random questions and trying out some comparison styles. So what do you guys think? Firstly, what are we comparing here? So what are the two things we're comparing? So lots of you guys are coming up with some good ideas. Yeah, but what are the two different sides? Yeah, countryside versus big city, right? So those are our A and B. Countryside we'll put here, right? And big city. Okay, second thing is, what's the comparison? How do we judge? What's our judging method? So in your opinion, what's the most important thing for children growing up? What are we measuring the environment on?
The access to education system.
All right. So lots of people like the topic of education, right? Some people are saying health as well. Okay. But I'm just going to go with the most popular. I think most people education, right? So judging method, right, is basically, right, something like, whoops. The most important thing for growing kids, right, is access to education or educational resources or something like that. Perfect. Right. Now, if you say education and health or education and medicine, then you're doing a double comparison, which actually, if you want, we can do that as well, right? We can say to education and medicine. Okay. So if you want, we can judge both of these at the same time. Right? In which case, when I do my description of both, I need to describe both what medical services and what education is available in the countryside, and also what medical services and education are available in the big city. Does that make sense to everyone? 就是我如果一下子要评论两样东西的话，那我两方面都是需要在这些段落里面描述一下。好，那我们试试看。Who can describe for me what's the education and medical services like in the country? Just a general, simple description. Right. So you can say very limited resources, right? Maybe just one local school or college, right? And a small clinic or something like that. Yeah. So this is this is like your average kind of country town. Okay. What about the big city? Right. So here we've got prestigious schools like the high level schools, right? We've got like, hospitals, etc. Right. But at the same time, also, right, more health issues though. Right. So big cities are usually more pollution and stuff. So on the one hand, the medical treatment is probably better. On the other hand, it's probably not that good for your health to begin with. right? Yeah. So in general, but based on what we've said here, big cities are better overall, right? Yeah, great. Based on this particular analysis. So is everyone following the logic for these? Nice and simple, right? And you don't want to make it too complicated, right? Remember, you're only writing 200 or 300 words, and this is just a very brief. This is like a very, very short description. Each of these is going to turn into a full body paragraph, right? So you don't want to put too many different things here. I would say that maybe 2 different things is probably the maximum, okay? And most of the time, you probably want to restrict yourself to just 1 because later you're going to want to put more detail into these. Okay, very good. We'll do one last one and then we'll move on to some actual writing practice. Before that, Xiaoyu, did you have a question?
老师，这个题和上一个题我有点不太明白，就是因为最近这个 city 这个教育这个就是不是就是城市和郊区这个东西，它那个其中一个观点是 limited，就相当于有点像负面的，就是感觉。但是上一个题的话，感觉2个就没有这种，一个是负面，一个是正面的感觉，就这2种都算是 compare。就是
我的意思是你随便什么东西可以变成一个对比，对吗？这个题目不一定要告诉你你一定要做个对比，但是你照样还是可以写一个对比。一个对比只是一个整理信息的一个方法。
但是我们在想这些 description 的时候是要以什么一个思路去想？因为我也会陷入误区，就是说评论一个东西，然后说这个东西好，那个东西不好，在这个方面。
大多数大多数的对比呢，就是如果他没有很明显的说出是一个对比，对不对？如果他没有直接说 countryside or big city，比如说，对不对？大多数情况呢，你就是会想，就是一种解决方式，像一种情况，或者呢，你会想，那我们有没有别的那个，比如说，如果有个问题的话，有没有别的解决方式，对吗？然后这样子，如果有另外的选择的话，那你就是可以做一个对比，哪个更强了，好吗？就是我的意思是，你可以把这些另外的选择什么的，把它带进这个问题里面，这个问题不一定要提到的，好吗？就像比如说刚才那个 artificial intelligence 这个题目，对不对？他只是在问 artificial intelligence 好不好，他倒没有说要做一个对比。但是我在想，这个现在一个情况大概是什么呢？很多人都是说，可能 AI 可以替换老师了，所以呢，我就把老师带进这个题目来，然后做一个对比。你理解我的意思吗？
就是我们在做对比的时候，还是不是说要简单的去思考这个东西在A 是不好的，在 B 是好的，不能这样对比，要说这个东西在评论标准上他们是不同的表现，然后再去对比，
对，
是这个意思吗？
这个 A 和 B 呢，你说的是可以的，但是这个通常是一个逻辑稍微弱一点的。为什么呢？因为经常 A 和 B 之间没有什么关系的。
哦，
没有个真的逻辑连接。如果你仔细看一下，就是这个评分标准这个逻辑连接的话，如果你的 A 和 B 之间是有个很明显的关系的话，那它的逻辑就会算强很多。我们现在这个对比呢，为什么这样写？因为我们的逻辑连接就是我们的这个 judging method，我们是用同样的评论方法，那个就是评论2方面，所以这是这2个段落中间的连接，好吗？
好。
对对，所以像我说的，我这个只是很多很多不同的作文类型中的一种。今天晚上我们只是在看这一种，好吗？我将来肯定是会那个给你们介绍一些不同的就是不同样子的作文。你说的这种也可以的，好吗？所以不是错的，但是呢，你在描述的是另外一种作文，对，
明白了，好，谢谢老师。
没问题。听涵 ，last question and then we'll move on。
老师，我是上一个那个 education 的那个题目，我看您在那个 description B 里面有说到，我们生活在大城市里面，also 就会有 more health issues。那我们最后的结论导向是 big cities 是更好的。那我在考试的时候中，我要提到生活在大城市里有很多 health issues 这个点吗？还是说？为了让考官觉得我有 critical thinking，
我现在就是每个就是描述一下情况，所以呢，我现在是在看 education 和 medicine，对不对啊？所以 education 我们知道就是大城市肯定学校更强，
嗯，
但是从个医疗这个方面的话呢，是同时医院更强一点，但是也同时就是那个大城市的污染什么的比较厉害。
哦，就可以提一下，然后
说不定就是评论这个，可能这方面呢跟乡下比较像，但是学校这方面肯定更强。
哦，好的好的，谢谢。那我为了混淆，我可能会
现在就是在，对，我是在做个对比，觉得哪个
好的，
更好一点。
没问题，谢谢老师。
对，当然就是你可能你不知道你用的是什么信息，你说不定到最后算出来的是完全相反的，也有可能的，好吗？所以我不是特别看重这个答案，这个是我现在去随便编的，对吗？你们就是真的做了一个仔细分析的时候呢，你们应该就是能算得出哪个更强一点。对，Yeah。对，没有这个这个 judging 呢，其实是你的结果，就是你对比了以后结果是什么？你的观点其实就是你觉得什么东西是最重要的，所以这个评论方式其实是你的观点。对你来说，孩子长大什么是最重要的？这是你的观点，对不对啊？或者每个人应该付多少钱是怎么算的？这是你的观点，对。Okay, good. Let's have a look at one last one. Okay, it's often argued that studying abroad is overrated. 到海外学习，好吗？There are many local scholars who find academic success. What's your opinion on this issue? Okay, 好，所以就是差不多就是说，你是不是感觉到海外去学习是值得的，还是其实不需要的？What do you guys think? Right? And remember, I want you to start with a judging method. How do you decide? How do you decide what is the best place to study? Okay, so we've got some good ideas. James says maybe it's about how to broaden your outlook, right? How to learn lots of new things. We've got some people saying things about like career or future, employment, how much money you can make, right? Salaries. Anna says it's about safety, right? Yeah, maybe we're concerned about going to a different country might be dangerous. Again, right? Lots of different ways. 就是每个人你们看得出，就是每个人有个不同的想法。有些人就是比较看重你将来能不能找到工作，有些人比较看重就是你是不是会学到很多新的文化或者什么东西，有些人可能看重那个经济或者那个叫什么安全这种东西，对不对啊？所以我的意思呢，就是你的这个评论的方式是你的观点。你自己感觉什么东西是比较有价值的。Okay, so the judging method is your opinion. Yeah. All right, good. So now I'm just having a look at the answers. It looks like the salaries and job opportunities one is probably the most popular. 好像大家就是最多的是说那个经济方面的，或者就是找工作，对不对啊？所以呢，那个你可能说the main purpose，对不对啊？of university or college，对不对啊？is to improve your career opportunities. Okay, so that's our main judging method. So whichever one's better is whichever one is better for your future career. Does that make sense? And now keep in mind, you can choose a different direction. You can talk about the cultural side or whatever, up to you. All right. But who can give me a simple description? So what's our A and B? Our A and B is like study locally versus study abroad, right? So who can give me a simple description? So how does studying locally affect your job opportunities? If you go to a local university or something like that and graduate there, right? If you do like local work experience and things, how does that affect your future career? Yeah, great, right? So we've got some good ideas, right? Study locally means that you have stronger connection, right, to local communities and job opportunities there, right? So for example, if you go to university locally and then maybe do an internship at a local company or something, you're much more likely to get employed, right? And also, right, local business contacts, things like that. Yeah, fantastic. right? Now, Han says something about local education being more affordable. That is true, but that is not our current judging method. 所以对，就是在附近学习当然是更便宜，但是这个就是另外一个方向，这是可能变成一个经济的分析，那个叫什么分析了，就是看值得不值得花这么多钱，对吗？ Yeah, good. Okay, what about the studying abroad? How does that affect our career opportunities?
Study different cultures all over the world.
Right. So you might get like more jobs
More
related,
jobs opportunities.
right, with cultural or like language
Yeah.
requirements,
Yeah.
right? Maybe things like big international companies or
Yeah.
something like that, right? Yeah, great.
Yeah.
So good. So what you can see is, what do you guys think? If you're like comparing these two, is there one that's better than the other, or does it like depend? 就是你们在评论，我们如果看这两个描述的话，关于 career opportunity，好像 yeah, most people say it kind of depends, right? Right? Depends on what kind of job you want, right? So, for example, small businesses, maybe local, right? Whereas big corporate jobs, sorry, I'm spelling, corporate jobs, probably international is better. Right. So that could be, yeah, that might be the final result, right? Obviously, right, once again, just remember we haven't actually, done the full analysis. We haven't we haven't put in all the details yet, but that could be what your final result looks like. Yeah. Good, good. Yeah, so in this case, it depends on what you want your future to be. Nice. So hopefully after these couple of exercises, everyone has a good idea of what the planning or the logical structure of one of these comparisons should be. All right. So next, the next step is the writing process. Okay. So once you have like a pretty good general idea or structure, then the next step is how do we do the writing? Okay. Now, Z asks, how do we use a template? The answer is if you want, you could find a comparison template, right? But these days, we recommend you don't use a template. Okay. In general, freestyle writing is going to produce much better results, especially for the high level scores. I did say at the beginning of this class that this class is a slightly more advanced one. So we're going to be doing lots of examples in the band 8 to band 9 range. Okay, so usually at band 8 to band 9, we encourage you to do freestyle writing. But as I'm about to show you, hopefully you're going to see freestyle writing is not as hard as people think. Yes, I know you will make some grammar mistakes and things like that, but the actual things you're writing don't have to be super difficult. Okay, so I'm going to start doing some quick examples again to show you guys what freestyle writing kind of looks like. And part of the freestyle writing can be templated, right? So I'll show you what I mean by that. All right, so for those of you who've come to my normal classes, you might be familiar with this system of introduction questions. Okay, so what this is when we try to write freestyle, the way that I try to get you guys to think is by asking some simple questions. If you can answer these kinds of questions, if you can write like one sentence each, then basically you have an introduction. That's it, right? An introduction is just the answer of these three questions. Yeah, you don't need to be scared, right? Like I said,你们就是写 freestyle 可能感觉很恐怖，但是呢，说到最后其实不是一个特别困难的一样东西。我觉得一个很重要的一点呢，就是你们在做练习的时候，你就是把一个大作文分成一小部分一小部分，写一个完整的大作文可能感觉很恐怖，对不对啊？但是呢，写比如说2、3个句子，这通常不是太困难。而且呢，就是你如果多做几遍的话，你很快就会找到一个模式了，就是你可以重复的一个模式，跟个模板差不多。 好吗？所以我们先看看，我们就是先看一下这个练习，先过1-2个，然后你再评论一下，就是是不是一个能做到的一个目标，好吗？对对，对，差不多就是，其实模板是什么？模板就是一个重复的句型，对不对啊？你如果就是写了，比如说10篇同样的作文的话，同样格式的作文的话，你会发现有很多句子是重复的，跟背一个模板差不多。对，Okay, so here's my 3 questions. Number 1, what is the topic and why are we talking about it? Why do we think it's an important point, right? Question 2, what's your opinion? How do you judge which option is better? We've already done that a few times, right? And number 3, what is your essay comparing? What is the A and B, the two things that you're comparing? So those are the 3 questions that we want to answer for every comparison style structure. So let's look at a simple example of this. Remember my first question, which is better, apples or oranges? So first question, what is the topic and why are we talking about it? Well, here's my topic. These days, the price of groceries has become so expensive that many families are struggling to get by. Now, why is this my background information? Why is this my introduction? Because I know that my essay is talking about the price of apples and oranges. 就是我刚才在做准备的时候呢，我举的例子就是我这个对比，就是看苹果和橘子的价钱，对吗？所以我在想这个背景是什么？为什么我们感觉这个重要？所以我的借口呢，就是因为现在就是经济不好。对不对啊？那个所有的蔬菜水果都特别贵，所以呢，我就是说我们现在要评论一下，到底怎么样买什么样子的水果呢？就是看哪个更便宜。好吗? Yeah. So basically, whatever the topic is, you're just giving a reason. Why is this an important topic? What's the current situation in our society which makes us interested in talking about the price of apples and oranges? All right. Now, secondly, what's my opinion? In my opinion, the choice of food should be based on affordability. Basically, cheaper is better. That's my judging method. And then, what about the body of my essay? This essay will compare the average price of apples and oranges at major supermarkets. Right? That's it. That's an introduction. 3 simple sentences, and it's very, very clear. After reading these, everyone can tell what my essay is going to be about, right? 就是大家这个一看，你就是知道我要讲的是什么东西了，对吗？而且不但知道，你是很清楚的，你知道就是我的 Body 1和 Body 2里面应该讲的是什么，对不对 ？Body 1肯定讲的是苹果 ，Body 2肯定讲的是橘子。然后我也知道他们的内容呢，就是对比一下价钱，我说不定就是看几个不同的超市 ，Coles、Woolworths 什么的，然后对比一下每个价钱是多少，那最后算一下。这种逻辑框架，这样子就是对上逻辑框架，你们都看得出吗？ Yeah, so this is kind of like a thinking pattern, right? And learning to basically like answer these types of questions. This might look a little bit difficult, but trust me when I say it's not as hard as people think, right? All it takes is a bit of practice. And remember what I said earlier about templates. 前面就是有个学生做模板，对不对啊？你如果看一下这些句子的话，有些地方是可以重复的，对吗？像比如说这里这个 these days， 我可以每次说背景都说 these days。这个 in my opinion， 我每次给个观点也可以说 in my opinion， 对吧？我如果是一个对比的话，我总是可以说 this essay will compare 什么东西 A and B， 对吗？So you might say that this is kind of like a template. It's not technically 100% a template. But basically every time I write an introduction, I can use the very similar kinds of sentences. And the more you do, the faster you get at it. So just my advice is keep your sentences simple and just try to answer the question as directly as you can. Yeah. Let's look at another example of an actual PT question, shall we? So remember our professional athletes question. Yeah. What was our judging method? Let's just quickly go back and remind ourselves what was our main judging method. So I said people deserve to be paid what they are worth. OK，所以这是我的主要的观点。然后呢，我就是对比了一下 professional athletes versus public service jobs。OK，所以这个我们知道了。所以回到这里的时候呢，就是 what are we saying, right? So and I don't have to do this in order. I can do them in whatever order I want. So I can say, in my opinion, right? People should be paid, right, according to what they are worth, or how much value they bring to their business. Okay, so that's my theory. That's my judging method, right? And then I can say this essay, right, will compare the let's say the value, right, of professional athletes, right, with social workers. Okay, so something like that. So you can see that's based on my plan. So the only thing I need to answer now is, why are we talking about this? Does anyone have any ideas? 我们可能为什么会讲这种话题? What's the background that makes us want to talk about this question? Something about social conflict, like what is the social conflict? What if you watch the news and stuff, what are people complaining about? Yeah, inequality, the gap between the rich and the poor, right? So, so you might say something like, these days, right, wealth inequality, right, is a serious issue, right? And people are complaining that some athletes, right, are earning hundreds of millions of dollars, per year, while others struggle to pay their rent, right? So this is kind of like the background, right? This is where this topic is actually coming from and why we think it's interesting. Yeah, fantastic, right? So, and keep in mind, your example might be slightly different to mine, but the general idea is about the same. Okay, yeah, nice. So now keep in mind, I know for this, the ideas I think are not too hard. The hardest part, of course, is learning how to quickly build sentences like this. 所以我知道，就是不是每个人的写作技巧都是同样强，对不对？有些学生关于造句呢，可能就是不能那么快速的，就是造出一个这样子的句子。对，但是呢，这个你们放心，用不着太担心这件事情，对吗？如果你们现在就是不一定说得出这种比较复杂的句子的话，你可以开始写的稍微简单一点，但是呢，就是这样子写，至少你的大概的方向肯定是正确的，对不对？你不会写的时候感觉非常迷茫，对吧？应该就是每一句应该讲的是什么东西，这个至少是解决了，对吗？ Yeah. All right. So, are there any questions here? Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah, and you can also see having a plan is very important, right? If you've already got a clear logical plan, it's much, much easier to write these kinds of intros and so on. Yeah. 对，你们不需要背。我觉得呢，你们可以试试看，就是比如说，我给你们一个句型，像这种 in my opinion 或者什么。说实话，像这种 in my opinion 其实根本不是一个完整的一个模板，对不对啊？这个其实只是一个句子的一个开头。但是呢，就是你们可以就是看看我写的或者别人写的，然后如果有些句型你们感觉是好像比较简单的，可以模仿的话，你们可以试试看，就是你自己做的时候，能不能造出这个句子，感觉是不是比较顺的。对吗？如果卡得很厉害的话，那说不定这个句子不是特别适合你。如果感觉比较舒服，就是造出个句子还可以的话，那你就可以用，对吗 ？Yeah， 造句就是要多做，要重复很多次数，好吗？所以呢，你会发现，就是你们在做这种练习的时候，你们第一次写这3句话，你这3句话说不定要写5分钟、10分钟，很正常的，对吗？但是呢，你如果连着拿，比如说10个题目。然后呢，就是每一个只写个 introduction， 这样很快的，而且都是差不多格式，全都是同样一个框架的话，你会发现到了第10次的时候呢，不需要5分钟了，可能就降到3分钟了，就是因为你重复的次数很多，好吗？因为你会发现这些句型你重复的用的时候，你就是感觉越来越熟悉了，越来越不需要仔细动脑子想语法什么这种东西，好吗？因为花样很少，对。So that's the main idea, right? If you want to get better, a large part of it comes down to practice. Tonight, we're just talking about the method. Yeah. All right, let's do one more of these, shall we? And because I didn't have enough time tonight, I'm just basically making these slides as we go. Let's get one of our other questions, shall we? How about the marketing question? Okay, so let's try let's try what would we write for these marketing questions. And if we want, we can keep these things, right? We can keep these kind of sentence headers and don't change them. All right, so what do we want to write for this one? So we can leave number 1 to the end. This one's the slightly harder one. What was my opinion for the marketing question? Does anyone remember?就是大家还记得说，我们说这个 marketing 这个时候，我们的主要观点是什么？对，是围绕着这个 profit，就是赚多少钱，对不对啊？所以呢，我可能就是in my opinion，对吗？The main purpose of marketing strategies is to maximize the profits for the business. Yeah, great. So that's our main judging method, right? And then what is our essay comparing? Yeah, reputation in short, right? So basically this essay will compare maybe like something like the profit margins, right, of reputation and short-term based strategies. Something like that. Easy. Yeah. Okay, now last question. This is the slightly harder one. What's our basis? Why are we talking about this? What is like a issue or a current situation in the world which makes us interested in this particular topic? Right. So a lot of people are saying companies have this decision to make, and some people are saying that the economy is bad, right? So let's combine these together, right? These days, right, the economy is bad, right? And businesses, right, need to make some smart choices, right, regarding their marketing strategies. Something like that, right? So it's very simple, right? We're just saying economy is bad, pressure is on, you got to make some smart choices. Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so yeah, I think lots of people in this class are already starting to catch on to the basic idea. Nice. So that is an introduction, nice and simple. Let's move on to a second one. We'll do a conclusion next because conclusions are nice and easy as well. We'll leave the body to the end because bodies tend to be, a little bit more complex. But conclusions are very simple. Conclusions are basically made up of 2 different parts. Okay, so we're going to give our conclusion questions here. The conclusion questions basically look like this, right? What is the result of the comparison, right? Which one is better? Or are they the same, right? Something like that. And finally, what is your recommendation, right? Now, you don't always have to give a recommendation, but from my experience, recommendations are the easiest thing to write. Yeah. Sorry, William, did you want to say something?
No, I'm all good.
Okay, cool. So yeah, let's try doing 1 or 2 of these as well, shall we? Let's do this one first. Our apples and oranges example. Okay. So which is better, apples or oranges? That was my question. So here is a based on the analysis, so we're pretending we already did a body paragraph, right? Based on the analysis, right, oranges were cheaper than apples, right, by approximately 40%, right, at most major supermarkets. So that might be the final result of my analysis, right? And so I recommend that, so that part could be kind of templated, right? I recommend that people stick to oranges when choosing fruits, yeah, at the shopping center, something like that. Nice and simple, okay? Just remember, whenever possible, try to keep your sentences really simple. Okay, any questions about that?
老师，我有一个问题，就是，这个评分标准里面有对你句型的复杂程度有要求吗？是，
是的，如果你的句型更复杂的话，它会稍微多奖励你一点分数。但是呢，
OK
但是这个比例是非常少的，
OK，
在那个 general linguistic range 里面，只是大概6分里面的1分，所以呢，这个我们不会就是排在最上面。你们不需要就是刚开始的时候就是故意把句子写得特别复杂，因为你也知道的，你如果想写得很复杂的话就很慢，
对，
对不对啊？你注意到今天晚上我在造句的时候，基本上不停的，我就是像平常讲话一样的这种感觉，对不对啊？我的这些句型是不是也是比较随意的，不是什么特别正规的？我可以告诉你，这个就是假如说我花了很多时间把它写的特别正规的话，这像个85到90分的区别，其实85已经够了，
OK，
对吗？Yeah. Good. Yeah. So there's no need for you to write super complicated. This is definitely not the best sentence that I can write, but it's a sentence that I can write in 10 seconds. And that's more valuable, I think, when you're practicing. Yeah. So that's the structure of a very simple conclusion, usually kind of like 2 sentences, right? So let's do another one, shall we? So let's do our example 1. What was our question? Professional athletes, right? Was that the first one? Yeah, professional athletes. Let's do it. So, based on the analysis, what do you think our final result might be? And keep in mind, we're making this up. We haven't actually done the analysis yet. But can anyone give me kind of like a reasonable analysis? 就是假如说我们做了一个对比的话，你们可能感觉这个结果可能是什么？前面我第一次问这个问题的时候，很多人都是在告诉我结果。What do you guys think? Right. So if we remind ourselves what was in our plan, right? We said that public servants deserve to be paid more, but that doesn't mean that athletes should be paid less, right? So yeah, so based on the analysis, right? Professional athletes, right, are worth hundreds of millions per year to their organizations, right? But many other professions are underpaid, right? So I recommend that the government, increases the salaries of their public servants or something like that. Yeah, something like that. That would be a pretty logical conclusion based on what I was saying before. Nice. All right, let's do one more. Example number 2, which was our this question: should marketing in companies which produce consumer goods like food and clothing place emphasis? So again, let's remind ourselves, what did we say here? Right? So the final result might have been something like reputation is more important for luxury brands, short-term strategy is more profitable. So it's like a half and half maybe result because they have different outcomes, right? So can anyone say roughly what this sentence should be? Who can give me a simple example here? Come on, guys, don't be shy. You can just turn on your microphone and speak if it's a little bit faster.
Marketing strategies like discount can get companies more cash inflows, which is vital companies' survival.
Right. Yeah. Great. So basically, this could our original version is kind of like a half and half, right? So if we look at this answer, we said the final result is like reputation is more important for luxury brands, maybe like where short-term strategies are more profitable for like cheaper items, perhaps. Or your version could be your version could also be correct. Maybe like if companies are requiring survival, then maybe the short-term strategies are better. Some people are saying reputation should be prioritized long-term, right? So all of these could be 就是你们现在说的都有可能是存在的一些不同的结果。OK， 当然，因为我们现在问题是我们 body 段还没写，所以我们没有真的做过这个分析，我们不知道我们最终的一个结果到底是什么东西。我现在只是编一个，我们现在主要在做一个造句的一个练习，对吗？所以我们可以两个拼起来，对不对？Based on the analysis, right? The reputation, right? Reputation is necessary for long-term profits, while short-term strategies, right, can help a business grow quickly and survive, or something like that, right? So maybe that's the result of our final analysis. And then what would the recommendation be then? Right. So maybe I recommend that most companies, right, find a balanced approach, right, that uses both strategies. Yeah. Exactly. Right. So, yeah. And there we go. Nice and simple. Right. Yeah. And obviously, depending on how you do your analysis, your answer could be completely different from this. This is just one example. Yeah. All right, fantastic. So that's what a conclusion looks like. And, you know, a lot of people say 20 minutes to write a full essay, it feels very challenging, right? But if you break it down into smaller parts and I say, can you write a conclusion like this in 2 or 3 minutes? I think most people will think, yeah, 2 or 3 minutes to write like a 2-sentence conclusion like this isn't too bad. Right, this is something that seems reasonable. So that's the goal when you're doing your practice, right? Once you've learned like one style of essay, you just want to break it up into small parts and do them really quickly. Yeah, do like 10 at a time before you take a break. And that way, each time you do it, it becomes faster and faster. You become more and more used to these kinds of simple statements. All right. Now, the last thing I'm going to do this evening is an example of a body. Now, unfortunately, the thing that makes body paragraphs a little more difficult is that they don't have a set structure, okay? Introductions and conclusions, you can basically always answer these two questions exactly the same way, never have to change. But body paragraphs are a little bit different, right? Because a body paragraph, the information, the kind of background, context, the descriptions and details that you put in depend on the question, right? So you never know exactly what kind of body paragraph you have to write in advance. You can't really get a set template for it. But it's a little bit like describe image, which is you're going to find certain sentences that you like for certain types of information. 就是用中文讲呢，这个你在写 body 的时候呢，是有点像 DI， 就是 DI 里面我们是有一些固定的模板，但是呢，我们也是我们是把它分成一个句型一个句型的。 对不对啊？所以呢，比如说在大众里面呢，如果你要举个例子的话，你可以每次都说 for example，但是呢，你也不一定是每一个作文都是举例子。大家大概理解我的意思吗？如果你要报一个数据的话，你可能是有个固定的报数据的句子，对不对啊？你如果想做一个讲个因果关系的话，你可能是有个固定的一个 because 或者一个 due to 等等，对不对啊？如果你是想再多加一个细节的话，你可能是固定有 additionally 或者 furthermore 这样子的东西。所以虽然就是每一个 body 段呢是有点不同的，但是你就是写多了的时候呢，就是不同类型的信息呢，你就是会有一些句子框架，就是自己感觉比较舒服，可以重复用的，跟这里是一样的，好吧？但是它的整体的框架呢，就是有点灵活了。Okay, let's start with a very simple example of this, right? So our first example is just going to be this apples or oranges one. Yeah. Okay, so I'm not going to write something too complicated, right? But here's an example of what this paragraph can kind of look like. Yeah. So, right. So here we're talking about the prices, right? So oranges are generally priced between, let's say, was like $1.80, right? And I don't know, $3.50 or something per kilo at most Australian retailers, right? Yeah. So this will be my topic sentence, right? Where I'm just directly going into this particular topic. Now, because I'm comparing prices, you're going to see that most of the sentences that I use in here are going to be statistics, 数据句子. Right. Now, this will obviously be different. If I'm comparing like marketing strategies, it's not going to be the same style of sentence. Right. Yeah. And I can say, for example, at Woolworths, the average price of a 4-kilo bag of oranges was, let's say, maybe $6.90, right? AUD in 2025. Similarly, right, at Coles, right, a 2-kilo bag of oranges had an average price of, let's say, I don't know, $3.95. Okay, yeah. So overall, right, oranges were one of the most affordable, right, citrus fruits. Yeah, great. So this is the kind of sentence that I would expect for this particular, this particular topic. Now, if I was to copy this and then I wanted to write one for apples, right? I can write a very similar thing. And because it's a comparison, what you'll find is that body paragraphs are often very similar to each other, right? So I might say in comparison, right? Apples were more expensive, right? Across the year. And maybe I have slightly different statistics here, right? When in season, right, apples averaged about, what was it, $3 per kilo, right, at greengrocers and supermarkets. But out of season, their prices climbed to between $4 and $5 per kilo, right? Apples are the price, or maybe I'll say something like the price of apples also depends on the variety, right? Granny Smith apples were very affordable, whereas Red Delicious and Fuji apples were significantly more expensive. Okay, so what you see is I'm just making all of this up. I obviously don't know the price of apples, right? But the point is that this is the kind of information that you would expect if you're doing a price comparison of the two, right? So if you remember, when we do our when you were thinking about our structure, right? All we said was that we're doing a price comparison. That's the only thing we know. Yeah, but when you're actually elaborating，就是在扩展的时候呢，你的目标其实就是说的信息越多越好，好吗？我这个全都是随便乱编出来的，但是我的意思就是，反正是跟我的这个主题有关的，我知道是在讲它的大概的数据的话就行了。Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah. 可以乱编的，对吗？因为你要记住，这个考试的主要的目标呢，不是在我们不在考就是你知道不知道苹果的价钱，我们是在考的是你的写作能力，好吗？所以如果你编出来的数据是符合就是你现在想强调这个观点的话就够了。Okay, so as long as what you're writing is relevant, as long as you are describing the prices of oranges and apples, then that's completely fine. Does that make sense? Right? Remember, this is a test of your writing skill, not a test of your general knowledge of whatever the topic is. Yeah. So as long as it makes sense and it is convincing, then that's good enough. What do you guys think? Like when you look at my sentences, my question is, do you believe it? Like, does this look like real statistics? I know I completely made them up, but do they look convincing to you, right? If they look like they might be real statistics, if you wrote them correctly, then that's all we care about. The examiner is not going to go and check the prices of apples, right? So it doesn't really matter. Yeah，当然呢，这个可能不是最好的例子，这个正好就是一个给数据的这种类型的作文，对不对啊？我们现在就是我们也做几个像这种呢，就可能没有那么多数据了，对不对啊？这些题目里面呢，可能有更多解释啊、描述背景等等。Yeah. All right. Very good. So let's do some brainstorming. So this is just like I said, this is one example of what I like to write. Yeah, let's do a second example, but this time.
William，这个会不会太久了呀？有没有？
什么事啊？
你要什么时候结束啊？
我到今天没有一个固定的结束时间。
对，我觉得要不下个礼拜再继续啊，因为我还要讲一些东西。
你也想讲一些东西是吗？
对，我觉得我不知道你等会我又等你2个小时，我可能。
OK， 那没事。那今天如果就讲到这里可以的，我们反正就是我们以后还会开更多课程的。
对，我觉得大家可能有点累了，我看 number 也开始 dropping 了。
Yeah, sure. 这样我这样最后讲一句话吧，好吗？
好的。
说今天晚上呢，我们是在做一个实验的一个课程，对不对？我们主要就是看就是这种教的方法，大家是不是比较了解、比较喜欢，好吗？所以今天晚上呢，你们听完课以后，如果可以的话，给我们点反馈，大概让我们知道一下，就是这个课程你觉得什么方面好，什么方面可能就是可以稍微改一下。对不对啊？可能缺少了什么样子的信息，然后呢，也就记住就是今天晚上我们讲的这个话题呢，是在 PT 这个逻辑里是算一些稍微高级一点的，好吗？我可以告诉你，就是如果你真的能做到我们今天晚上说到的东西呢，其实你的分数几乎是至少是8分的水平了，可能到9分水平了。所以，说实话呢，事实一点，大多数学生刚开始的时候是做不到这些东西的。所以今天晚上我们主要是让你了解一下，知道你可以一个最终的一个目标大概是什么样子，好吗？所以你们别太担心，就是如果今天晚上所有的东西不能一下子吸收的话，用不着太担心这件事情，好吗？这是慢慢来的，对。All right. Yeah. How about I'll pass the class over to William for some final words then, and we'll continue this next time.
好的。
Yes.
对，我也跟大家说一下，对，就是我们现在做这节课的目的，就大家突然拿到我们这个通知，就是因为大家听到我讲话吧？对，the reason we do that is because 因为我们PT 已经改革了，它现在就基本上有点像那个雅思托福了，但是它逻辑性没有像雅思托福那么紧，包括思培，但是它不能像以前一样的只是很单一的使用模板。但是大家如果从雅思托福过来，大家都明白，雅思托福在写作和 谢谢学员给我们很多反馈，说很对，就是你知道雅思托福的学生讲最多的一句话就是这个根本不是考英文，这考你逻辑能力，你知道这雅思托福学生讲最多的一句话。那么之前 PT 是完全没这一块的，就是非常小，他说有其实没有了，对吧？所以他现在就是这样的话，就是他是有一点逻辑思维能力在这里边的，但是他这个逻辑思维属于比较简单的，就是你稍微就是能把这件事情讲清楚。你用你的像刚刚这个 comparison 的一种比较，数字的比较，包括句子比较，基本上就可以拿到一个比较高的分数。写作我们在那个8月7号之后，学生过渡率还是很高的。大家应该知道，最近就是一个16岁的孩子在我们上完之后，他就考了68分的写作，他只有16岁。包括那个4个90分的学生，包括那个就上礼拜前2天过那个这些学生，但是呢，他们使用的方法就是我们之前所说的，就像这样，你一定要去想这些观点，然后想这些观点的论证。那么刚刚有个学生就问我，我好像想不到，你想不到原因是因为你从小到大就没有这方面的训练的，这个不是你的问题，是教育的问题，就是你们就是没有这种想法的，你懂吗？那你怎么有这种想法呢？就是你要去多去看一些文章，特别是这种 essay 的文章，然后上课的时候多去跟着维安老师的这个思维去走。如果你还是没有的话，我可以把我们的资料发你看一下，你可以看一下别人是怎么，他的观点是什么，他论证是什么，你懂吗？就我以前在新东方里边教雅思的时候，我发现就中国学生几乎是没有任何想法的，他们就从小就是听父母，长大听老婆，单位里听领导，是不需要有什么想法的，对吧？但现在这个考试就是你稍微有一个自己的观点，然后讲出自己的观点，你如果跟着维恩老师这思路走，你听懂了，以你们想一下那个16岁的孩子，他没有背任何单词，这是他原话，他没有时间背单词，他就高中3500单词，他说他就知道，因为高2水平嘛，他也考了69分的写作，就是那我想说什么呢？就是他的那些单词和我们上课讲他的内容，他被激发出来了。所以就是说，你们现在这种水平，如果你想要考7炸是不难的，因为7炸只要69，对吧？就你基本上就你现有的这些单词，你把它给写好，基本上就69了。如果你是要8炸的话，你就稍微再背一些观点，再背一些论据，再用我们给你的方法，8炸也不是很难的，你懂吗？因为大家知道 PT 改革之后，它的口语就变得比较简单，然后听力也是，阅读也没有变很难。然后很多人就担心的是写作，那么我和威廉就觉得我们可以试一下这样写作一种新的模式，大家感受一下，也是我和威廉一直想要这么做的，对吧？但就是之前你们可能也听不进，因为用模板不就解决了嘛。那现在的话，它已经开始严重查模板了，对我们来说也不是特别难，就这种模式大家可以感受一下，好吧？然后你们还有什么其他的问题吗？可以问我，或者给我打字都可以。我们最后再留个5分钟时间回答学生问题吧。对我们 OK 的，我们下礼拜如果有时间的话，我们可以再做一次这样的一个 presentation， 好吧？That's okay, thank you very much。对我看只有那个小舒同学啊，是打开这样对，想感觉好，是的，对。请问这个继续会在上？对我们上课时会说一些的，对的。请问一下阅读课是怎么授课的？你关于授课的问题，你可以单独加一下我的微信好吗？我帮你加一下微信后，我跟你说。对，不用担心阅读啊，我就没见过阅读过不了的。我以前在新东方最看不起就是阅读，对，而且 PTE 阅读是整个考试里面最简单的。你们阅读不好是因为你们根本不练，就是如果你的方式练错了，你的口语和你的写作是提不上去的。但我觉得你阅读，就算你方式练错了，我估计你也能提高一点。因为它就是像收集那个宠物小精灵一样的，它就这么点东西，你知道了以后就知道了，你懂吗？所以不用，所以阅读就是你们去练就没问题了，对吧？对，就阅读经常不看的，就之前你们复习的时候根本就不看阅读的。我跟你们说过了，我8月7号那天我做监考的时候，我看了以后，我觉得阅读一点都不难，对的，它跟雅思根本就没法比的，对，就是对以前就背模板，对吧？你们要有基本的书面的表达能力的，这个是基本能力，你懂我意思吗？没这个能力，在澳大利亚怎么留学呀？我靠，这太搞笑了，对吧？对吧？好吧，这个是基本的一个语言表达能力，对吧？这是写作能力，不是很难的。他又不强调你用什么很高级的词，对吧？他也不像雅思一样要求你什么4个句子写的不同sentence structure，都没这个要求的。就算你逻辑不是那么的好， 没有特别答题，他也不会马上扣你分，对吧？像雅思托福直接就扣你分了，你这就 game over 了，对吧？所以大家有这个思路去走，这个其实最大的 challenge 在于老师，因为这个就没那么容易教，你发现没有？这个是很考验老师。你看威廉老师都现场帮你写的，这个很难的。大多老师最喜欢用模板来教你们，为什么？用模板直接就照着念不就得了呗，对吧？所以这对老师的是非常难。我以前新东方最讨厌就教写作，每次他妈都要考我的，不是考你啊。每次学员给我拿个题我都没见过，我要瞬间想这道题，然后想10个 idea， 然后10个 idea， 每个 idea 3个 supporting sentences， 我还把它写出来，还教你们，这对我是超级 challenge，你知道吧？你知道这是为什么我不想当写作老师，很累，你知道吧？我当个阅读老师多简单，照题念都是了，对吧？所以知道吗？这是为什么我们最近会忙成这样，对吧？所以你气炸不炸不找我们找谁呀？好吧，
我们可能下次上课之前，我们早点通知，然后我们可以在微信群里就是直接问学生，你们想那天练哪些题目，让你们选。
对，这是最好的，这就是我们当时就是这么试老师，你有个题目拿出来，而且但你自己去想，你别随便找个题来 challenge 我们，太搞笑了。你要比如说你想一道，你觉得哎这最好是原题嘛，你说哎我写不出来，或写到这里我卡住了，你知道吧？我当时就这么练的，然后卡住了，那我也老师说哎你卡在哪里，然后我帮你看一下，然后我帮你分解一下，然后或者是你写了一句话，这句话里边可能我们写的更加好，我根据你的意思，我帮你编出这个句子来，是你的意思，我帮你改编，你有什么记不住的？这是你的想法，我只帮你改编的更好逻辑，这种是高手。改语法的、改单词的，你需要老师改吗？妈把ChatGPT 都帮你改了，但他不一定能替你改这个逻辑和想象力。你要有想法的，你知道吧？而且你不需要很好的想法，PTE 的题目都简单的要死，我靠，他不会问你很夸张的题，懂我是吧？好吧，大家那就先这样了，好吧？我们今天就到这里结束了，谢谢大家的观看，然后我们下个礼拜再见，拜拜。